The world changes at 6:17 a.m. Though no one realizes it in the instant, the sky over eastern Poland brightens with an unnatural, colorless flare. The light blooms silently, as if the air itself is holding its breath, and for a few suspended seconds the morning remains gentle, fragile, unaware that history has shifted beneath it. Commuters sip coffee. Radios hum. Trains brake softly along their rails. Then the first alerts arrive, sharp enough to cut through the dawn. Bob feels his phone vibrate once, then again, then continuously, a tremor that stops him mid-stride on a quiet Warsaw street. As a journalist, he has lived through false alarms and chaotic newsrooms, but nothing about this morning feels routine. His breath forms a pale cloud in the cold air as he reads the fragmented message. Possible detonation. Eastern sector. Await confirmation. Before he can process it, a flood of alerts cascades down his screen, each one colder than the last, stripping the moment of its ordinary shape. Across the city, Alice watches monitors flicker inside the dim NATO analysis room, where she has spent more nights than mornings this month. She expected another day of mapping digital interference, not this ruptured feed showing a flash too bright to categorize. Her fingers hover over the keyboard, suspended between instinct and disbelief. The data stream stutters, then stabilizes, then fractures again, as if the world's sensors are struggling to translate fear into numbers. Her breath is slow, controlled, but her pulse betrays her. She knows the flash is real long before anyone confirms it. Sirens do not begin immediately. Instead, a strange quiet spreads through the streets, a silence so heavy it seems to press against the skin. Bob notices people around him stopping as if pulled by the same invisible thread, their phones lighting their faces with the same cold glare. A woman drops her bag without noticing. A man whispers something only he can hear. A bus driver pulls over with no instruction to do so. The world reacts not to sound but to uncertainty, to the moment when shared reality begins to fracture. Bob lifts his camera, not out of duty but instinct. The urge to document the instant humanity loses its footing. Alice breaks the silence in the briefing room. "We need verification from the Eastern Grid," she says, her voice calm but edged with tension. "Full spectrum analysis. Yield confirmation." Her colleagues move with mechanical precision, though every motion feels slightly delayed. Alice keeps her gaze fixed on the satellite image, the expanding halo of atmospheric disturbance, the jagged outline of destruction. She knows that within minutes the world will know too. And she knows those minutes are the final thin membrane between denial and truth. At 6:22 a.m., the sirens begin. Not piercing, almost hesitant. They rise over rooftops with a wavering cry, as if the city itself is unsure whether to panic. Bob hears the first wail drift through the winter air, and feels something cold settle beneath his ribs. Even the wind seems to hold still. He begins walking, slow but steady, as if motion itself is a form of acceptance. He films the street as the sirens swell around him, echoing down empty intersections and trembling shop signs. The footage feels unreal, like a documentary filmed decades after the event, yet he knows this is the moment history cracks open. In Brussels, Alice listens to emergency channels bursting with overlapping voices. Protocols spoken through clenched teeth, questions delivered too quickly to process. She filters the noise, anchoring herself to the numbers. Radiation spikes, shockwave signatures, atmospheric readings. The pattern becomes undeniable. "This was deliberate," she whispers, though no one needs convincing. She sends the confirmation to upper command with steady hands, aware that what she has just transmitted will reshape policy, alliances, and futures. Outside, the sky brightens, but the world feels darker. Bob sees people turning east, even though the detonation happened far beyond their sight. They look anyway, driven by an instinct older than language, the need to witness the source of fear. The clouds reflect a faint, unnatural glow, like a sunrise arriving from the wrong direction. People murmur fragmented questions. Is it over? Will there be more? But no one expects answers. Bob keeps filming until his hands shake too much to hold steady. Alice receives the confirmation she dreaded. The strike is on Polish soil. A NATO member. A line crossed without ambiguity. She closes her eyes, a single, controlled breath marking the moment when uncertainty becomes crisis. Then she opens them and begins speaking, every word precise. We're entering the first hour of escalation. All responses are now under active review. Her voice does not tremble, but the room seems to shrink around her. Bob stands in a small public square where dozens have gathered, not for safety but for presence, for proximity to other people while the world redefines itself. Their faces glow under the dim light of their screens, updates vibrating like heartbeats. There is no shouting, only a heavy, collective silence. A silence that feels like the air between two approaching storms. When the official announcement reaches them, confirmation of a nuclear strike, the crowd does not scream. It exhales. A single, trembling breath shared by strangers who now understand they are living inside the first chapter of something far larger than themselves. Bob feels the weight of that realization in his bones, as if the ground beneath him has shifted half an inch to the left. In the analysis room, Alice watches a new sequence appear on her monitor. The numbers are unstable. Something else is moving in the eastern airspace. She leans forward, eyes narrowing, breath stilling. The world has not yet settled. It is only pausing. And in that pause, something new begins to take shape. The air inside the operations floor felt heavier than usual. Alice moved quickly between stations, her expression calm on the surface but trembling underneath. The anomalous signals from the border had multiplied, repeating in odd rhythmic patterns that resembled neither weather interference nor routine military testing. She wanted a clear culprit, a clean explanation that would ground her, but the data only deepened the mystery. Jeremiah arrived 10 minutes later, his gait slower than usual, as though he had spent the night negotiating with the memory of the hollowness he had felt in the kitchen. He returned Alice's glance, grateful for her presence, but unsure how to voice the spiraling fear coiling inside him. Something was wrong, far beyond the scope of the department's routine alerts. He could feel it thrumming under his skin, like an electrical current. When the security doors opened again, Martin stepped inside with the clipped efficiency of someone who had not slept but refused to let exhaustion slow him. He scanned the room and immediately sensed the tension. His throat tightened. He recognized the look in Alice's eyes, the one that meant the numbers had stopped behaving. He approached her desk quietly, reading the graphs before she even spoke. Peaks, dips, and jagged bursts of signal intensity sprawled across the screen in patterns that formed no logical system. "It repeated again at 4:30, Alice said softly. "And then twice after that, each time stronger." Jeremiah leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowing. "Any chance it's just a technical fault?" She shook her head. "I rebuilt the analyzer from scratch. This isn't a glitch." Martin exhaled slowly, rubbing his thumb against the center of his palm. "If it's deliberate, someone wants us confused before we're alarmed." The theory settled between them like dust. Alice zoomed in on the waveform, tracing the erratic pulses with a fingertip. Each peak felt like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Each pattern felt like a whisper from something just beyond their comprehension. Jeremiah finally broke the silence. "Let me run it through the predictive model. Maybe we'll catch a pattern that makes sense." Martin hesitated before nodding. "Do it. And keep it offline. If someone is probing our systems, I don't want to broadcast that we're watching." The implication hung unspoken. If this was an adversary, they were playing a dangerous, deliberate game. Alice felt a shiver crawl along her spine. The possibility of an attack had always existed in briefing documents and contingency plans, but it was different seeing it materialize in real time. The thought of civilians waking to an ordinary morning, without any idea of the threat creeping toward them, tightened her chest. She imagined her parents drinking tea in the garden, unaware that something malignant stirred beneath the calm. As Jeremiah carried the data drive to the far console, Martin leaned close to Alice. "I need you clear-headed," he murmured. "Whatever this is, we're going to handle it." She swallowed hard. "I believe you. I just can't shake the feeling we're already too late." He had no answer for that, not one he could give without lying. Time bled forward as the team filtered through new reports. The signals continued, whispering their strange, coded warnings. Jeremiah slid on his headset, brow knitting as the model attempted to map the waveform. Lines crossed, overlapped and collapsed, refusing to form anything recognizable. He muttered under his breath, tapping furiously at the console. Martin paced, the sound of his footsteps marking time in the silent room. With each lap he scanned the wall of screens, searching for anything he had missed. He had been in the department long enough to read the subtle shifts of geopolitical undercurrents. But this felt like the prelude to something far larger than an isolated threat. Jeremiah waved Alice over. "Look at this," he whispered, pulling up a layered comparison. "The pulses aren't random. They're converging." Her heart quickened. Converging toward what? He enlarged a highlighted region of the graph. An origin point. Martin was at their backs in seconds. "Show me." Jeremiah adjusted the display, revealing 3 sets of signals trending toward a common source. The coordinates flickered on the screen: remote, strategic, unmistakable. Alice pressed her hand against her mouth. "That's a launch corridor." Martin grimaced. "Or a staging path." The realization hit with the force of a blow. This was no test, no encrypted misfire of foreign communication channels. Someone was mapping a trajectory. And if the pulses were indicators rather than mere noise, the timing suggested preparation rather than hypotheticals. A low alarm chimed across the floor, drawing the room's focus. New information streamed in: unusual aviation patterns, a disruption in satellite telemetry, unverified chatter from field units. One anomaly could be dismissed. A dozen could not. Martin straightened, voice firm. "Everyone, listen up. We're elevating readiness. No one leaves, no one shares anything outside secured lines." The room shifted into a higher gear. Alice's pulse kept pace with it, rising in unsteady waves. She thought of the families, the cities, the fragile routines of millions who sensed nothing of the shadow stretching toward them. Jeremiah returned to the origin point display, eyes narrowing. The timing aligns too well with the satellite dropouts. If this is coordinated, they're masking movement. "Which means they're closer than we think," Martin said. Before anyone could respond, the primary lights flickered. A hush swept across the floor. The screens froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough to inject fear into the room's collective breath. When the systems restored, a new window flashed at the center of Alice's monitor. She stared at it, her face draining of color. "Martin, you need to see this." He stepped behind her, gripping the back of her chair as the message resolved into focus. A final, undeniable confirmation buried inside the latest signal burst. The origin point wasn't just converging. It was active. The revelation rippled through them, tightening every instinct and confirming that the quiet dread haunting the morning carried the unmistakable shape of an approaching storm. The moment the confirmation appeared on Alice's screen, the room felt as if the air itself contracted. No one spoke. No one breathed with ease. The quiet hum of machines became the only anchor in a space where certainty had just dissolved. A single truth pressed in on all of them. The signals were not a warning. They were the countdown. Martin steadied himself, but his fingers betrayed a tremor. He had lived through crises, briefings, and near conflicts, yet nothing in his memory carried the same cold clarity as this moment. He leaned over Alice's shoulder, scanning the decoded message again. The trajectory lines, the timing sequence, the unmistakable imprint of an active launch corridor. It formed a pattern that refused interpretation beyond the most devastating possibility. Jeremiah sank into the chair beside her, rubbing a hand over his mouth. "If the activation is real," he whispered, "we're approaching the threshold. The moment where everything shifts." Alice's throat tightened. "We need confirmation from the satellite team." Martin nodded, already reaching for the secure phone. But before he could dial, the line lit with an incoming priority alert. He hesitated only a second before answering. The voice on the other end was strained, stripped of all formality. Real-time satellites were detecting heat signatures, major ones. Not tests. Not drills. Movement consistent with pre-launch operations. Alice closed her eyes. The dread she had carried through the morning crystallized into something sharp metallic. The fear of being too late no longer felt hypothetical. It felt like the air she was breathing. Jeremiah pulled up additional overlays, layering telemetry from the border region. The screen filled with red pulses that moved in synchronized waves. "This is coordinated," he muttered. "Multiple systems aligning." "And our response window?" Martin asked. "Shrinking," Jeremiah answered. "Fast." The overhead lights flickered again. This time, they did not immediately return to full brightness. For a moment the room was suspended in a dim twilight, shadows lengthening across faces carved by tension. When the lights finally steadied, the atmosphere had shifted. The silence was heavier. The team moved slower, not from hesitation, but from the terrible weight of knowing what might be unfolding beyond their walls. Alice stood. She needed air that wasn't thick with panic. She moved to the observation window overlooking the courtyard below. Outside, early morning traffic rolled across the street. People walked, unaware that the stability of their world had cracked open miles away. A woman lifted her child into a stroller. A man tied his dog's leash. Life continued with the false confidence of routine. She whispered, almost to herself, "They don't know. They don't feel it yet." Jeremiah joined her, standing close enough for their shoulders to brush. "That's the worst part," he said softly. "The quiet before impact. The minutes when the world is still whole." A sudden chime echoed through the operations floor. A new data packet uploaded itself to the central monitor. The room froze. Martin approached the screen with the deliberate slowness of someone walking through water. The data render revealed seismic tremors near the suspected launch sites. Controlled, mechanical. Preparatory shifts. Jeremiah exhaled shakily. "They're adjusting platforms." Alice felt her heartbeat falter. She turned to Martin. "We have to alert command. Now." He didn't argue. He placed the call with a tone that felt stripped down to bone. The response from command was immediate and chilling. Other departments were seeing similar anomalies. Intelligence networks were narrowing the list of possibilities. Nothing benign remained on it. The orders that followed were sharp, procedural, delivered without emotion. Elevate monitoring. Prepare escalation pathways. Stand by for confirmation of hostile intent. None of the directives addressed fear. None acknowledged the pulse of dread running through every person receiving them. After ending the call, Martin remained still, head lowered. "This is becoming irreversible." Alice stepped closer. "What happens if we've already crossed that line?" He didn't meet her eyes. "Then the next signal will tell us." The room settled into a grim rhythm. Data streamed. Fingers typed. Eyes flicked across maps dense with threat indicators. Alice worked with a precision fueled not by confidence but by responsibility. Jeremiah monitored the predictive model, adjusting variables with frantic discipline. Martin moved between stations, steadying the team with the gravity of his presence. Minutes stretched. Patterns formed. The tremors intensified. Then the alarms erupted. Not the soft alerts they had been hearing all morning, but the deep resonant warning tone the department had tested for years yet never activated in authentic conditions. The kind that suggested a transition from threat to event. Alice felt the sound vibrate through her ribs. Jeremiah shot to his feet. Martin's expression hardened into something resolute. A message flashed across the primary screen. Massive energy spike detected. Jeremiah whispered, horrified. "That's ignition level." Alice's knees weakened. She clutched the edge of her desk to steady herself. "Which direction?" she asked, though part of her already knew. The answer came in the form of a trajectory overlay. A single line arcing across the continent, highlighted in brutal clarity. Martin closed his eyes for half a second, as if mourning the moment before the world changed. Jeremiah spoke the words none of them wanted to hear. "It's targeting Poland." Alice's breath left her in a sharp, involuntary exhale. The line on the screen felt like a blade pressed against the map, cutting a wound through quiet cities and unseen lives. Martin turned to the team, voice level but carrying the force of everything he feared. "Prepare for confirmation." Silence returned, deeper than before, heavier than any alarm. The next packet of data began downloading slowly, agonizingly slowly, every percent another beat of dread. Alice watched it load, her pulse matching the rising numbers. 90%. 93. 97. Jeremiah whispered. Please let the reading be wrong. The progress bar reached 100. The room held its breath. The confirmation appeared in stark, merciless text. A launch had occurred. And the sky above Poland was no longer empty.